Hi everyone, welcome back to our session from market research. Today's topic is qualitative research. This is a branch within market research in the sense that it still tries to understand consumer opinions, consumer feedback about brands, the way consumers decide about a product, on and so forth. But it is highly specialized within the field of market research itself. So market research itself can be broadly divided as quantitative research and as qualitative research. And to a great extent, the kind of skill sets required for the two branches of research are quite different from each other. Of course, there are common skill sets that are required, like you need a good understanding of branding, you need a good understanding of consumer behavior, you need a lot of curiosity about human behavior. All those things are common. But quantitative research calls for a very good understanding of statistical analysis, for example, things like questionnaire design. On the other hand, qualitative research, primarily requires a lot of sensitivity to people, to emotions, to images. It's an altogether softer field, so to speak, right? So let's go forward. Let's see more about what qualitative research is all about. Right, so let's go a little deeper into what qualitative research is all about and how it is done, when it is done, how the findings are analyzed, so on and so forth. Let's start with an example of qualitative research. So let's say that we're talking to a lady who is about 33 years old, just for example. Let's say she got married at about 25 or 24, which is young these days for a lady to get married, but it was still fairly common about 20 years ago. And let's say she's got a 5-year-old child. And let's say this young mother gives this 5-year-old child Horlicks, the milk food, health drink Horlicks. And she gives it to the child on a regular basis. So let's say our study is about milk food drinks, about health drinks for children. So we do a survey with this lady and we ask her, why do you give Horlicks to your child? So she'll say answers like the ones that are given here. She will say, because Horlicks is very good for health. Because Horlicks is very good for health, or because Horlicks builds resistance, builds immunity, because Horlicks gives energy, because Horlicks helps in bone growth, because Horlicks has got calcium and all of the minerals in it for the body. All these are various possible reasons. Horlicks makes a person grow taller, Horlicks makes a person study better for examinations, gives mental stamina, etc., etc., etc. All these are possible. All these are correct. All these are rational. However, the problem is that it is very rational, right? It is perhaps not going to the underlying emotional reasons why she is giving Horlicks to the child. So, if instead we were doing qualitative research, we were doing a technique called depth interview as opposed to a structured interview survey, and we asked this lady using appropriate techniques for probing, if we ask her, why did you give your child Horlicks? And then, at that point she would well give a reason which goes as below. You see, when I was a child, one day I came home from school and I was, half asleep after my school work. I was tired. And, my neighboring auntie was asking my mother, hey, why did you give your child Horlicks? And my mother replied, saying, my child deserves the best and Horlicks is very good for her. But then the neighboring auntie says, but Horlicks is so expensive. Why do you want to give her something so expensive? Can't you give her a cheaper product? To which my mother replied, saying, I will never compromise on my child's health. I will give the best product even if it's costlier, and so I'll give Horlicks. Now, this particular respondent of ours may say this about her mom when she was a child, about why her mom gave her Horlicks. And it may have stayed in her mind. It may have stayed in her mind that, a committed mother, a caring mother, never compromises on the child's health. And Horlicks is the brand that ensures that the committed mother never compromises on a child's health. Horlicks is one of the ways in which a mother shows commitment to the child's health. And therefore, this respondent now gives Horlicks to her child. This is the power of qualitative research. Now, if you had straightforwardly asked this in a structured interview, this entire story, this entire background, leading to the emotional conclusion would not have come. So this is where qualitative research plays a role. And a skilled qualitative researcher knows when the obvious answer is the correct answer, and when, we need to go deeper into probing into the consumer's mind. Right? I hope this bit is clear so far. I'll take a break to see how the pen is working. So back. So what are the typical uses of qualitative research? Very simply put, qualitative research is meant to provide insight into the consumer's mind in those areas or in those topics where the consumer is not able to easily articulate his or her opinions or his or her reasons. And therefore, it is meant to handle those kind of information areas which a structured questionnaire cannot probe. This is the primary purpose, to go deeper into the consumer's mind. But it's also used in lighter ways. So you first use qualitative research to generate height parameters which can be used in a questionnaire. For example, let's say we did a study about cooking oil. So we can ask a group of consumers, how do you decide which brand of cooking oil to use? So the one consumer could say, I go by taste. Another consumer could say, I go by whether it imparts a good taste to the dish that I cook. A third consumer could say, I go by the aroma. A fourth consumer could say that I go by whether it's easy or heavy for me to digest. A fifth consumer could say that, it should leave the original taste of the food intact. So these are the various parameters based on which the consumers decide which cooking oil to use. Now this has come from a qualitative research, specifically from a technique called group discussion. And therefore now these parameters will go into a larger scale quantitative study where consumers will give their opinion about brand A, how does it perform these parameters, brand B, how does it perform these parameters, brand C, how does it perform these parameters, so on and so forth. So quantitative research can generate parameters or it can generate hypotheses for validation. The validation happens through quantitative research, right? So these are the kind of applications of qualitative research. The full-fledged, powerful application of qualitative research is to provide insight into the consumer's mind in areas which the consumer cannot articulate. Lighter applications to generate parameters, to generate hypotheses. Right? Should we go forward? So qualitative research can be used in positioning research, can be used in packaging research, can be used in new product testing, can be used in usage and attitude. So this term stands for usage and attitude. It can be used in advertising research, and it can be used in diagnosis study to find out why a particular brand is dropping in sales, or why consumers are not even trying a particular brand, so on and so forth. Maybe we're talking about this elsewhere, maybe I've covered this elsewhere, but I will repeat what the word positioning means here. Positioning is a set of qualities that a brand stands for. So the brand can stand for saying, I make the shirt whiter, or the brand can stand for saying, I'm a very good value for money brand, or the brand can stand for saying, I'm meant for so and so kind of consumer, so on and so forth. So the position is what the brand says about itself. It is sort of the reason why a consumer should buy the brand. Sort of. I mean, it's not the only reason why, but one of the main reasons why a consumer should buy a brand, because of the position that the brand has taken. Right? So good qualitative research revolves on good moderation. Now, remember, we don't call this interviewing, we call this moderation. Interviewing is you ask a question, you get an answer, you ask the next question, you get the next answer, so on and so forth. It's a very, very structured process. Moderation is an extremely sensitive process. It's a process of asking questions, yes, sure, but listening very hard to the answers and asking the next question appropriately. So in a questionnaire approach, for example, you go like this. You go in a straight line. Sometimes you go in a loop and you come back to the straight line and you continue. Whereas in moderation, your starting point could be here. Sometimes you could go here, and then you could come back here. Then you come down like this. Then you go down like this. Then you skip like this. Then you come back. All this is possible. The skilled moderator, based on the way the person is answering the questions, knows, okay, now I'll skip 3 questions, come to this, the 4th question, and then come back to this question when the time is appropriate. Right? So, good qualitative research revolves around good moderation and very sensitive analysis. So, when I say sensitive analysis, what I mean is there are a whole lot of techniques that we can use. But techniques are like computers. You feed in junk, you will get on junk. We also need over and above that human sensitivity to say, I have reached the deepest possible answer, or I need to dig deeper. Right? So, that comes with experience, that comes with a certain natural aptitude for qualitative research. In moderation, the key skill is to make people open up and talk freely. But at the same time, the marketing thread of the conversation should not be lost. So, a discussion guide, again, I'm using a term here, it's called discussion guide. Right, or DG. A DG is what we use here. We don't use a questionnaire. We use a discussion guide here. It's a very, very free-flowing document, right? So a discussion guide has to be completed. All the probe areas there should be covered by the moderator. But at the same time, the moderator should be sensitive to letting the person talk. Some people take a lot of probing to open up. Some people open up very freely. The skilled moderator knows which person will talk more freely, which person needs more encouragement to talk freely. They need to reassure them saying that I'm listening to you, but I'm not making a valid judgment about you. I'm listening to you, but the data that you give me is confidential. It's not going to go beyond us. Right? All those skills are required for a good moderator. In analysis, the key skill is to get insight and understanding beyond what the consumer is verbalizing. So you have to analyze tone of the person's voice, you have to analyze body language, but without reading too much. We are not talking about psychiatric analysis here. We're not trying to analyze a person's psyche or the personality, right? We just understand the person's relationship with a particular brand and nothing more than that. And tone is very important. Body language is very important. The moderator needs to be sensitive about and the analysis needs to be sensitive about when the respondent seems to be speaking the whole truth, when the respondent seems to be holding back on some piece of information, when the respondent is talking about something in a slightly disapproving tone or in a very positive tone, right? So there are interpretations which goes beyond just the words in qualitative research. So there are essentially 2 broad methods of data collection. One is called group discussion. And the other is called depth interview. Group discussion is basically what the name suggests. You have one moderator and you have maybe 2 or 3 or very often 8 respondents sitting in one group discussion, sitting around a round table, and they're all having a discussion about a particular subject. A depth interview is done one moderator, one respondent at a time. Right? And these kind of data collection sessions are always audio recorded. And very often they're video recorded as well to permit body language analysis and accuracy of data interpretation. Right? So the typical analysis process in qualitative research involves listening to the tapes, watching the video, and going through transcripts of a discussion. Now, do you know what a transcript is? Let me just explain that. A transcript is a word for word recording, writing down of what is there in the conversation. So it's an exact verbatim copy of what has been spoken. That's what is known as a transcription. I mean, the term is very familiar to many people because of medical transcription, right? It's the same kind of transcription. You listen to what's going on in the interview, moderator asks a question, respondent gives so and so answer, everything must be captured exactly word for word. And while I have said that body language and tone are important, it's really not used that often. One of my little bit of grouses against the market research industry is that we're not using it as much as we should be using it, because it is very powerful. It can tell us a lot more about what the consumer thinks. But I do feel that we're not using it as much as we should be using it. Right? Should we go forward? There are times, and I would say a majority of times, when a qualitative study comes before a quantitative study. Now, for example, when we are doing a customer satisfaction research, and we're not sure what could be the various parameters. So, for example, we want to find out how satisfied people are with the laptop. And let's say we don't know much about laptops. Just for example, let's say we don't know much about laptops. So we want to find out, are you happy on the whole with laptop? That we can ask. But we also want to find out, are you happy with the laptop of parameter A, parameter B, parameter C, parameter D? But we don't know what these parameters A, B, C, D are. In which case, we do some initial qualitative research among people, and we can ask them, hey, what do you like about brand A? So they will say, about brand A, I like the fact that it's very fast in processing and it's very portable. And then we ask them what you dislike about brand A. They say, the problem with brand A is that the battery charge runs out too quickly. So now we know that there are three parameters at least which are important. One is it's fast in processing, it should be lightweight and portable, and three, the battery charge should last for a long time. So then we ask them what do you like about brand B, and they tell you that brand B has got a very comfortable keyboard layout. So we know that there's a fourth parameter, the keyboard layout is important. And we ask them what you dislike about brand B. We say there's nothing much to dislike about brand B, which is fine. Then what do you like about brand C? And they say that brand C is good because it has got multiple USB sockets. So we know that there's one more parameter called number of USB sockets is important. So in this way, we go on and go forth, and we find that there are totally X number of parameters. In our particular example, we're talking about 3 brands, we found 5 parameters: number of USB sockets, the layout of the keys, the life of the battery charge, the processing speed, and the portability. So 5 parameters is what we discovered. So these parameters we will then put into a questionnaire. So in this situation, the qualitative research coming before the quantitative research was useful for us. The same principle applies to brand health research, right? We could also use qualitative research to generate a long list of brands. If you're studying, for example, to go back to the cooking oil example that I gave a few minutes ago, let's say we do a cooking oil study in every district of a particular state, let's say every district of Bihar. Now, we all know that there are some major brands of cooking oil. We all know that there is Sunrock, there is Saffola, there is Fortune, and there are some XYZ brands which are national level brands. And people living in Bihar will know that there are some state level large brands as well. Now, there may be some local brands, there may be some regional brands which we don't know. So, some initial qualitative research among 3 people in this district, 3 people in that district will help us to add brand 1, brand 2, brand 3. So, somebody sitting in one particular district will say, I use a brand called Gold Coin. Somebody sitting in some other district will say, I use a brand called Gems, etc., etc., etc. will happen. Right? Another particular application of when we use qualitative before quantitative is we generate typical consumer speak, typical consumer lingo. For example, and these are very real examples, so they are not hypothetical examples. North Indians, some North Indians, especially from the smaller towns, maybe not from a town like Delhi, will say suit for the set of salwar kameez. They'll say suit salwani hai, right? I don't know how many of you know Hindi, but they'll say suit. And some of them say copy for a notebook. I have left a copy back in office, right? The habits carried forward from school follow. And many of the methods each other as those. Tamil people don't understand, if you want to talk about a particular batsman, Virat Kohli is an excellent batsman. Chance it. Now, what does it mean? If you expand the sentence, it means there is no chance that he can be matched to anybody. But it has become generally understood for the person to say chance it, which means everybody understands that they are praising this batsman, that is a very good batsman. So, qualitative research will tell us these kind of consumer speak. And consumer speak is very useful in communication research and advertising research, because advertising needs to hit the nail on the head in terms of using the same kind of language that typical consumers tend to use. So that's when they create the empathy, the connection with the ad, with the brand. Right. Shall we go forward? There are times call is used after call. For example, let's say 60% of respondents in a new concept are open to buying a product. We are doing a study for a new concept test, and we say 60% of people are saying that yes, I will buy this product, and 23% say no, I will not buy this product. So this is the quantitative portion of the study, and after this, the qualitative portion is used to talk in depth to a subsample of these people, and we ask, hey, you said you're positive. Why are you positive? Then we ask somebody else, you said you're negative. Why are you negative? Why will you not buy? So that gives us in-depth reasons for the responses which we have already captured in the quantitative research. Right? So in general, when qualitative comes after quantitative, the objective is generally to find out the reasons, to find out why. In general, when qualitative used before quantitative, as we saw here, it is to generate options. Right? So, in all these situations, we generate options. Okay. Apart from this, as I said, all these are lighter applications of quality. Apart from this, there is a real heavy use of quality, which is in-depth projective techniques and probing techniques that help us to understand very deeply about the kind of image that a consumer carries about a brand, or what kind of emotional impact an advertising has on a consumer, and so on and so forth. Right? Let's go forward. There are situations where people misuse qualitative research. So we can call it abuse, we can call it misuse. And this is like, I remember many years ago I went to a doctor, and I said I had a mind problem, and he said, okay, you can have so and so medicine. And I said, do I need an injection, very powerful injection? He said, when a bullet will do the job, don't use a grenade. In other words, he was saying, don't use powerful techniques unless they are really called for. So the same thing applies to qualitative. Qualitative research is very, very powerful. It's very, very insightful. It is to be used when we really need the deeper insight. We can't generally use qualitative because you talk to people in a group discussion and you come up with some conclusions. Right? That's very quick and very dirty research. It can mislead. Certainly its use is not justified in those situations. I'm having a break because I've got a call. I've got the call, so I'm back here. So certainly its use is not justified in certain situations. Like, for example, when people use group discussions as a cheap or as a quick substitute for quantitative research. Sometimes they use qualitative for things like ad recall. Now, why I'm saying here it is wrong is that when we say recall, it is automatically implied that we need to measure percentage of people who recall. And qualitative research is completely unsuitable for percentage. Qualitative research is completely unsuitable for any kind of measurement. The minute we talk about words like measurement, we talk about words like volume, number of consumers, proportion of consumers, percentage of consumers, mean score, amount spent, etc., etc., etc. All these are numerical related terms. All these require quantitative research. Quali is used only in situations where we need to understand and not measure. And this is an important thing to keep in mind. The two techniques are complementary. They can work together to give us brilliant insight, but neither is a substitute for the other. And there are clear situations where we need to use X, where we need to use Y. And we need to be clear about that in our own lives. Going forward here. So, when do we use quali? When do we use quanti? Whenever we want to project from the sample to the population, whenever we want to say 30% of the sample says they're buying a brand, therefore in the population also a sizable proportion is buying the brand, we need quanti. Whenever we want to measure the extent to which consumers are satisfied, and therefore we are forming conclusions about the overall consumer base, customer base, we need quanti. Whenever we want to understand things like recall percentages or what will be the volume of sales of this particular brand if we launch it in the market, we need quanti. Right? So whenever we need any kind of measurement, on the other hand, whenever we need insight, let me go deeper into why the consumer feels in this way. Let me go deeper into how this consumer is relating to this particular packaging, or relating to this particular advertisement, or relating to this particular TV serial, or to this web series. Whenever we need to go deeper into the consumer's mind, deeper into the consumer's emotions, you need qualitative research. So insight, when the study is very, very focused on deep insight, we need qualitative research. When the study is very, very focused on measuring, we need quantitative research. There are many situations where we require both, of course. You need hybrid techniques, or sometimes you need a little bit of quali and a little bit of quanti. We'll come to those situations, but this is the broad criteria. Now, why isn't qualitative research numerically valid? We have had situations where, as I told you a few minutes ago, a typical group discussion has got about 8 respondents and 1 moderator. So if you do 5 group discussions, there is 8 into 5, it's 40 respondents. If you do 10 group discussions, there is 80 respondents. So we have situations where people ask, well, it is 80 people giving an answer, right? Why can't you treat it like a quantitative research? That is also numerically valid. 80 is a large number. As in the example I've given on the slide here, people say that if you have 20 group discussions and you have 8 people, so you end up with 160 people, which is a pretty good sample size. The argument is not correct. It's a fallacious argument because, number one, group discussions use convenience sampling. They do not use probability sampling. And any quantitative research, any kind of measurement to be reliable requires probability sampling. It cannot work with non-probability sampling. Convenience sampling, as we've seen earlier, is a non-probability sampling technique. In a group discussion, the response given by a respondent is partly a reaction to what the others are saying. So one respondent in the group says, hey, you know what, I find that when I'm using Facebook, this thing keeps popping up. To which the other respondent says, no, but I don't have that experience at all. What I found is that with Facebook, that doesn't happen. This way you can block it. So they're not just giving their own individual opinions in an unaffected way. Because when the second person says, the first person could say, oh yes, you're right. Okay, no, that is not really a problem. I understand. Now, whereas if only the first person was talking, we would go back with the feeling that, oh, that seems to be a problem with for people when they're just using Facebook. So the problem is a group discussion, because there is so much interaction with people, sometimes they're agreeing with each other, sometimes they're disagreeing with each other. It is not exactly the same as one person's response in isolation. And therefore, we cannot extrapolate from the sample to the population. So this is the second main reason why, even if you do a large number of group discussions, it is not equivalent to a quantitative research. Now, to some extent, this problem can be tackled by using depth interviews. So the depth interview is done one-on-one, as we said. So in that we can say 20% savings, 30% savings, but we still require very large number of sample sizes. And that becomes unwieldy, that becomes awkward to do. It also becomes very expensive, by the way. But essentially, it's a good thing to keep in mind that group discussions and depth interviews, qualitative research in general, is meant to be done with very, very small sample research. So, to go back to the same framework that we used, when we need a lot of insight, primarily insight, we use qualitative research, and that can be either group discussions or depth interviews. When we use measurement, when we need projectability or measurement, we do quantitative research. But in between, there's a hybrid model. This is semi-depth. Semi-depth interviews. So, essentially, this is something like a cross between a questionnaire and a discussion guide. The questions are still in a structured form, but it allows for very high quality probing. In this method, we can do reasonably large sample sizes, and we can arrive at good results as well. The results give you fairly good insight, not as powerful as a depth interview or group discussion, but still it can give you good insight. And it can give you a good level of projectability, a good level of measurement as well. Therefore, it combines, to a great extent, it combines the best of qualitative and quantitative research. Now you may say, if this is true, why isn't every study done with semi-depth interviews? The answer to that is very simple. There are studies which require only very much in-depth insight, in which case this technique is not applicable. It won't give you the necessary results. There are situations where we require only very simple measurement and complete large sample sizes. Then too, this technique won't give you good results. So it is applicable in a large number of cases, but not in all cases. There are times you require only this, there are times you require only this. Right? So let's go forward. There's a fourth situation, hypothetical situation. What do you do when you want low insight as well as low measurement? Well, obviously you don't do research at all. It is, if you don't want insight, if you don't want measurement, it means you don't want data, you don't want information. So you don't do research. That's it, research. Okay, so we've already talked about this. The vast majority of studies require probing at this level of complexity. This is what we're talking about, right? Light qualitative research. Okay, so it doesn't require very high level of quality, it doesn't require projective techniques and so on and so forth. It's slightly more than just probing, saying, why do you say so? Somewhere in between, and that will take care of most kind of situations. So this is an insight continuum. This goes from very low insight all the way to very high insight. Okay. So let's look at some scenarios. Let us say a company has developed a TV commercial, right? And they want to find out whether the TV commercial will work or not. In this situation, what do we require? There are many things that we require. We need to find out what percentage of people are likely to notice this commercial. What percentage of people are likely to say that they like this commercial, they feel like seeing it again and again. But we also need to understand how emotionally this commercial connects with people. So what's the technique that we require? We require quantitative. We also require qualitative here. So we need to measure. We also need insight. So both techniques are important here. And in the qualitative, we can use either depth interviews or we can use group discussions. Either technique is appropriate here. The industry practice is to use more of group discussions because they happen faster, right? Now, a similar situation, but here we don't have the full-fledged TV commercial. We have a concept for an ad. This has been generated, and we want to find out is it likely to work. Now, when we show an ad concept, it is difficult to measure to what extent the ad is likely to be recalled. It's difficult to measure to what extent the ad is going to be liked. Therefore, quantitative is not appropriate here, and we can use only qualitative research here. Right? Because we cannot measure accurately. Since the ad is not yet in a ready form, we cannot measure accurately whether people will like it, whether people will remember, and so on and so forth. And since we cannot measure, we need a high level of probing to see what kind of reaction it elicits from people, and therefore we do more qualitative research here. Why are my consumers lapsing? So I have a brand, and consumers who were using the brand have stopped using it now, which is the technical meaning of the meaning of the technical term lapsing. So they stopped using it. Why are they lapsing? So I need to probe for reasons. So I need insight, which means I need quality. Why? Because we need insight. How can I position my new prepaid card? Same, positioning. I need to understand how consumers relate to this category called prepaid cards. I need to understand what kind of position will create a hook in their minds. Therefore, I need qualitative research. But I don't need very in-depth qualitative research for this. I just need decent semi-depth kind of probing. Semi-depth interview should suffice for this. What volumes will my new bike brand generate? I'm launching a new brand of motorcycles. What kind of volume can I expect? Volume. The word volume straight away takes us to quantitative research because you have to measure volume. Any kind of measurement necessarily needs quantitative research. I mean, it's a no-brainer. You don't even think about it. It's an open and shut case. When the word volume is used, when the word measure is used, you need quantitative research. What are the connotations of brand name? Connotations is a classic application of qualitative research. What are the connotations of the name Indira, for example? So, somebody may talk about Indira stands for this in Sanskrit, Indira works for that in Sanskrit. A lot of Indians would say Indira reminded of a former Prime Minister, Indira Gandhi. Therefore, somebody who is very successful, very powerful, very influential, very dynamic, right? All the qualities that you associate with, the head of a government. She was a Prime Minister, so head of the government. So, all the good qualities that associate, and those names get associated with that name, Indira. Somebody talks about what are the names that you associate. If I call my brand, there is a brand called Lion Dates, for example. Right? Lion Dates, the date syrup, the product. Lion is associated with health, with strength, with vitality, with stamina. And therefore, Lion Dates syrup automatically gets associated with the qualities that the word lion is associated with. So these are connotations of a name or of a word. And invariably this comes from qualitative research. Will the majority like this brand name is the next situation. Majority. There we go. We're back into measurement. And measurement always means quantitative research. Right? Does this color scheme on my back suggest a cheerful brand? No, this is not very different from connotations, and therefore we are back with quality here. Right? So we have to go through the situation. We have to go through what are we trying to find out, and based on what we are trying to find out, we have got to decide primarily: do we need quantitative research or qualitative research or both? Or do we need a hybrid technique? If it is qualitative research, will group discussion serve the purpose better, or will depth interview serve the better? So, just to repeat what we said about different kinds of data collection techniques, we have got depth interviews and we have got group discussions. Now, full group discussions is typically about 7 to 9 people. There is something called extended. This typically lasts for about 1 hour. There are rare situations when we take the discussion for more than 2 hours. Those are called extended group discussions. There are situations where we do the discussion with couples, husband and wife together, in which case we have 4 or 5 couples in that discussion. There are times we just have 4 or 5 respondents, and they are called mini group discussions. There are times we just have 3 people, therefore it's called a triad. There are times we just have 2 people, therefore it's called a diad, right? And then of course depth interviews are 1 respondent talking to 1 moderator, 1:1 kind of thing. But basically, there are these 2 techniques, depth interviews and group discussion. So either one-on-one or 1 moderator and several respondents. When we use group discussions, when we use depth interviews, group discussions are more useful to generate ideas. Depth interviews are more useful to talk to individuals in depth. Also, depth interviews are very useful when we want to talk about sensitive subjects like health, for example, or financial planning, for example. People don't like talking about these topics in front of other people. Therefore, they may not work very well in a GD, these topics. Also, when we're talking to very upper income people, it is logistically difficult to bring them at the same time. And therefore, we tend to prefer depth interviews. People like doctors, senior managers, etc., etc. So, when the need is more exploratory, as in we need to generate parameters, generate hypotheses, we use group discussions, or the mini group discussions or something like that. Whenever the need is more diagnostic, as in why a consumer behaves in a certain way, in those situations we need individual interviews. The best application of group discussion is this: when you have people with contrasting points of view. This person says brand A is better, this person says brand B is better, and these 2 guys argue with each other. And so brand A convinces the other person why brand A is better, the brand B person convinces the other person why brand B is better. And when they exchange this kind of discussion, when they have what we call conflict group discussions, so it's not a conflict in the sense of a fight, it's just a conflict in terms of having opposing points of view. We actually get very rich data.